I like that this is from 12 hours ago, and in the time frame that this news article came out, Israel already said, nah, no. I'm saying it. So as you guys know, yesterday, Joseph Robinette Brandon came out of the gates swinging. This section of the YouTube VOD will say Hasan's big legs, 1109. Yeah. Yesterday, President Brandon came out and was like, that's right, Jack. Israel told me we got a new proposal, and it's a great one. And Israel loves this proposal. And it's up to Hamas to follow through on the conditions of this proposal. And it was like, we looked at the proposal, and it was literally almost verbatim ripped. Bar for bar, stole their shit, stole their goddamn flow, a Hamas proposal. So for me, I was like, this is a weird way to release a Hamas-backed proposal. But okay, fuck it, YOLO mode. You know what I mean? It seems great to me. And for some weird, tell the Discord that you're live, by the way. Wait, what do you mean? Did it not actually send a message to everybody in the Discord? Oh my God, stream discussion just turned into gay discussion. What the hell is going on? Anyway, me when I have the pings off, tell the Discord you're live, Assam. Hate crimes are triple during Pride Month. Oh, it's a triple bonus. All right, let's get to the news. Let's get to like real genocide and not the kind of genocide that we just watched. Okay, that wasn't the news segment. Yeah, no.
President Biden has urged Hamas to accept a new Israeli proposal to free hostages and bring about a lasting ceasefire.
I like that this is from 12 hours ago, and in the time frame that this was, in the time frame that this news article came out, Israel already said, nah, actually, it's our proposal, which it wasn't. It was the Hamas proposal, and no.
Mr. Biden, speaking from the White House, unveiled the three-part plan which would begin with a 6-week ceasefire in which the Israeli Defense Forces would withdraw from populated areas of Gaza. There would also be a surge of humanitarian aid as well as an exchange of some hostages for Palestinian prisoners. The president said it was time for this war to end. Hamas issued a statement saying it was ready to deal positively with any proposal offering a permanent ceasefire and a complete Israeli withdrawal. Well, shortly after President Biden spoke, Democratic and Republican leaders invited...
No, we did watch this last night. You just weren't here.
...the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address a joint meeting of Congress. The date of the speech has not yet been set. Our first report this hour is from our correspondent Vincent McAvenny.
After almost 8 months of Israeli response to the 7th of October attacks by Hamas, Gaza lays largely in ruins, with the lives of Palestinians who call it home turned upside down. More than 36,000 have been killed across the region, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Hundreds of thousands are displaced, and aid is struggling to reach them. The conflict has put the US-Israel relationship under immense pressure. But in a surprise move, President Biden unveiled a new peace proposal and ceasefire offer from Israel.
I know there are those in Israel who will not agree with this plan and will call for the war to continue indefinitely. Some are even in the government coalition. And they've made it clear they want to occupy Gaza, they want to keep fighting for years, and the hostages are not a priority to them. Well, I've urged the leadership in Israel to stand behind this deal, despite whatever pressure comes.
President Biden outlined a 3-phase proposal that would begin with an immediate 6-week ceasefire. At the same time, Israeli forces would carry out a withdrawal from Gaza. Israeli hostages in Gaza would be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners, and 600 trucks of humanitarian aid would be delivered there each day. In the second phase,
So interesting that, once again, I talked about this quite a bit yesterday, but it is, of course, identical to the Hamas proposal that came out in February, a couple months prior, as you know. And also some version of this proposal has been repeatedly suggested on 39 different occasions since early October by Hamas and rejected by Israel numerous times over. Now, having said that, Brandon came out and said this is the Israeli proposal. One must ask the question why he said that. I suspect he said that because he wanted to be like, listen, this is good for you, Israel. We're going to start doing what we perceive is better for you so you don't get like cast away as a pariah state. And we're just going to lie and say that this was your proposal, even though it was the Hamas proposal. The other reason why I think that that they said this is Israel's proposal is because they want to pressure Israel. It is another, in my opinion, miscalculation. The miscalculation there being that Israel is not going to do what's best for them. Israel will probably, predictably, continue in the same way that they have so far, which is no proposal whatsoever. Now, the real question is, will the American media see this and report on it accurately? So far, they have not. The analysis is that he didn't want the reasonable proposal to be something Hamas had proposed because Hamas is supposed to be the peace-obstructing, peace-hating party. That narrative is now crumbling. I know. But if you've been actually paying attention, as many of you in here have been, you already know that Israel was the real obstacle to peace, so much so that you probably have a different opinion of the so-called peace process, negotiations that took place many decades prior, because the way that it was actually reported in the media and the way that is taught in our books is entirely different than the way things actually unfolded. You might not have actually studied this closely, but looking at the way that Israel has behaved throughout this siege and looking at the way that the media has covered Israel's behavior throughout the siege, you probably get a better understanding of how the previous peace proposal was actually conducted and how it was reported in both the news at the time and also in our history books. You are watching reality unfold in front of your eyes in quite a dramatically different way, if not the exact inverse way, than the way it is being presented in the media. Okay? So, obviously, Israel's been the obstacle before, but now the framing's a bit different. No, Israel has always been the obstacle. The problem is the attitude shift has occurred very dramatically. Unfortunately for Israel, it's not just coming from, people are not just learning about this stuff from mainstream media. They are now seeing it with their own two eyes directly, from the casualties themselves, from the survivors themselves. This is precisely the reason why, even when the media reports on this stuff in the way that they normally do, most people go, f that. Once again, Israel can no longer control the narrative, and the media has to respond to that outside pressure. Something that I've talked about quite frequently off camera with some friends who try to understand why, like, even the mainstream attitude is shifting a little bit against the Israeli direction. And that is because the media does have to still maintain a level of authority and a level of impartiality in order to be able to do propaganda in times of need, when it's desperately needed. If you're so aggressively doing propaganda when most of the people recognize you're doing propaganda, at that point, you're going to lose more and more people to independent media outlets and maybe even charlatans, right? Outside of the sphere of mainstream, just permanent contrarians, anti-vaxxers, hateful people. And that is genuinely damaging to public discourse in general, and it's genuinely damaging to mainstream media in general. So they have to at least maintain a level of impartiality. So that is the reason why they have to respond to all of the unimaginable churn of anti-Israeli sentiment that the public has and the realities that the public sees outside of course, the neat little confines, the neat little bubble that the mainstream media tries to create, where they try to always stop the narrative, always stop the narrative that like Israel is doing something wrong. Israel's actually doing wrong things, but they're doing it in a careful manner, but sometimes they're not so careful, yada, yada, yada. They always contextualize the violence from one side. Now, having said that, an analog here can be seen with East Palestine, Ohio, ironically enough. If you guys recall, when the train derailment occurred in East Palestine, Ohio, and this massive cloud erupted, people were genuinely scared. They were filming it. They were talking about it. They were mostly talking about it on TikTok. And then the story became, why the fuck is mainstream media not covering this? Which only forced mainstream media's hand to cover the story. Now, the reason why mainstream media had not covered that story prior is not just because they are obviously interested in protecting profits and corporations and whatnot, but also because, and I told you this at the time, 3 of those derailments to, different severity occur every single day in this country. 3 train derailments a day. Some just as devastating as East Palestine, Ohio, others not as devastating. But they happen all the time. And most people in media know this. So they're like, what? It's just another train derailment. Why the f will we cover it? There's 1,000 of them a year. But they were forced to cover it because everyone was like, what the f is going on? The reason why I'm explaining this example to you is because it is analogous to what's going on with Gaza, okay? The media normally doesn't cover anything that Israel is doing, any of the atrocities that Israel commits on a regular basis with regular frequency. However, this time it became impossible to ignore. This time it became impossible to contextualize. This time there was other social media platforms where people could see with their own 2 eyes exactly the devastation, the death, and the destruction that Israel was dishing out to the Palestinian population. So that's why they are still ultimately going to run as much cover for Israel as physically possible, while trying to also retain a sense of impartiality over it that is needed for them to maintain their authority. These are 2 conflicting, these are 2 different motivations in direct contradiction with one another. If you accurately report on what the fuck's going on, then you have to call it a genocide. But if you call it a genocide, then you're going against the other reason why you exist, which is to, of course, do the bidding of the American State Department. But if you do the bidding of the American State Department too much, then all of a sudden you've lost your authority, you've lost your credibility with an entire generation. And that is precisely what is happening here. That's why you see desperate calls to whitewash Israel's genocide with a little bit of decent news coverage sandwiched in between. Okay? But the real reason why the real coverage has to happen is so that in times of need, when push comes to shove and they have to literally do the propaganda necessary to correspond to American State Department interests, they have to have a sense of credibility. They have to have people trust mainstream news. When you lose that trust, then no one's going to listen to you when you report on it. The Iraq War was a major change of pace. A lot of the democratization of media that you see, a lot of the independent media that you see now, in that time frame, in the consent being manufactured for the war on terror, which was a $6 trillion project, and the failure of that all created a phenomenal opportunity for independent outlets to basically say, "Nah, this is bullshit." That also caused a lot of chaos, though. COVID was another moment where people further continued their distrust of mainstream outlets. And I think that we are now living in that universe where we are now living in the ashes of that, where unfortunately for our institutions that want to at least maintain some level of consistent messaging, sometimes that's good, like in COVID. Okay? During COVID, when people were talking about like best practices and bringing forward scientists and whatnot to speak on health initiatives, epidemiologists and the like that was a good thing. But people already mistrusted mainstream media so much and so dramatically, and there were so many outlets that kept talking about, well, the media lies to us. Look at the Iraq War. They could just point to that and point to many other instances where mainstream media had been caught trying to cultivate a narrative that people already had that inherent mistrust, and they no longer wanted to listen to what the they were saying, especially in times when they were saying things like you have to stay at home. This, in my opinion, is a dangerous prospect. Okay, it's a dangerous prospect. But if you are wondering why, like, the attitude has changed, even in mainstream outlets, like where they are kind of showing Israel's atrocities, that is the reason. Because they want to desperately get back to a point where you at least have some level of credibility for mainstream media outlets and you trust them a little bit. Okay. It's forced us to watch mainstream media with a filter, i.e. watching you watch CNN and telling us how they're playing us and what's right and what's wrong. Yes. And it's still very important. I still think that regardless of the consent that mainstream media tries to manufacture, it's still very important for it to exist. It's incredibly important. Who else is going to do the journalism? It's not going to be me. I'm here serving you top of the hour ad breaks. That's my job. My job is not to go there and like point a camera at people and try to develop a better understanding of what the fuck's going on in the world. Anyway, but at the top of the hour, there is a 3-minute ad break. And if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. By connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, you get 1 free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Hopefully that's me. Here's a 3-minute ad break now. System Stirs. Thank you for the 7 community gifted subs. This is the only outlet where you can have serious news coverage after a gooning video that is like absolutely devastating. Okay. Only to have a guy named Thick Booty 69420 go, which do you think is more moderate, Islam or Christianity? I know this is off topic. Feel free to ignore while I send this a few times. There's no other place where you can have that interrupt regular news coverage immediately after a 3-minute ad break comes and interrupts the regular news coverage anyway for those who are unsubscribed. New York Times writes, Netanyahu answers Biden's calls for truce by insisting on destruction of Hamas. Now, New York Times wrote this report showing Jabalia, the refugee camp of what remains of Jabalia in northern Gaza, okay? And also saying like that the Israeli authorities are saying they're not going to do it because there's also aspects of the war cabinet. However, 28 minutes ago, Israel, according to Barak Ravid's reporting, confirms the Gaza hostage ceasefire deal proposal details laid out by Biden. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his aides are focusing on the aspects of a potential deal that are more favorable to Israel as the prime minister faces opposition to the proposal that could threaten the future of his coalition. Do you not believe any of the reporting that this proposal came from the Israel War Council this week? They said Bibi was on the losing side of the vote, which is why he's trying to kill it. Well, now apparently he's on the side that says yes to the vote. And yes, I do know that there was a reporting that came out from, I do believe the reporting that the Israeli War Council was the one who suggested this. Except I also believe that Biden added the ceasefire and permanent end to hostilities aspect to the Israeli War Council's original 3-phase program, because the Israeli War Council's ultimate goal was to maintain the occupation, or at least like stay in Gaza till, according to their own, according to the additional reporting on the matter, stay there until January, until after the election was over. Do you see what I'm saying? But what I do know for a fact, regardless of the palace intrigue, okay, regardless of the palace intrigue, is that what I do know is in some way, shape, or form, Hamas has introduced negotiations processes. In the negotiations processes, Hamas has introduced bills that are either damn near identical to this one or very close to it. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the issue. I do believe that the American government added the ceasefire aspect to this specifically to trap Israel in a bind. I think that they recognize the domestic pressure on Biden's reelection chances. And more importantly than that, I think they recognize the international community's pressure placed upon Israel becoming a pariah state. That is what is going on here. So I do think that they took the Israeli war cabinet's conditions and basically turned it into the exact same proposal that Hamas had said yes to, if you recall, right in the eve of the Rafah invasion. If you recall, Hamas had said yes to a ceasefire proposal that was cut by Qatar and the CIA. Then additional news came out saying, oh, the Egyptian envoys actually changed the terms and negotiations of the proposal, and that's why Hamas said yes to it. Nobody knew. I don't believe that. I do believe what happened is that America cut a separate deal with Hamas saying, no, we're gonna get these guys to back down. Just say yes to this, and we will cut this ceasefire and and permanent end to the hostility, permanent end to hostilities bill. Just play ball with us. You are more likely to get reasonable outcomes from us than Israel. In this negotiations process, the parties that I trust, if I'm looking at like who I trust the most, I 100%, and people will yell at me for saying this, but I'll openly state this, I trust the Hamas envoys more than I trust the Israeli government. And I trust the American government even more than I trust the Israeli government. I think that the Israeli war cabinet is in a very desperate situation where there are conflicting opinions on how to manage the ethnic cleansing and the apartheid, with many, even the moderate voices on the cabinet, saying that they want to continue in some way, shape, or form the eradication of Hamas, which we all know now is basically complete death and destruction of the entire life of the Gazan civilian population. I think that at least for America, there is an additional interest in maintaining its hegemonic power, maintaining some kind of influence so that they can retain like soft power in the region to a certain degree. So I think that the American government is trying to force through public pressure this way, which it could have done literally a month in, by the way, a month into the siege, when already 5,000 people, 10,000 people had been murdered by Israel. They could have done this back then and nipped this shit in the bud, which would have, in my opinion, given Israel a better opportunity to continue with a more liberal, more tolerant approach to the apartheid. Israel, on the other hand, refused to play ball. American State Department employees that thought, you know, maybe Israel can continue doing this kind of thing because of the prior ways of being able to shut out any kind of communication from the Gaza Strip that doesn't correspond to the pro-Israeli narrative. That was gone, and I think they mismanaged the situation and misjudged how little they would get, how much pushback they would get. Not how little, sorry. They misjudged how little people would criticize Israel, or how much people would criticize Israel. Okay? Did you see the new soldier that was captured by Hamas? Israel denied it, but Hamas showed a video of the soldier today. Yes, I saw it, but I can't show it to you, obviously, because he's like pretty dead. He's virtually dead in the video. And he most likely succumbed to his injuries after said video, after his capture. Showing also videos of any captured soldiers is a war crime, technically. Yeah. Smotrich and Ben Gvir, by the way, the two biggest psychos in the Netanyahu, not war cabinet, but like the Netanyahu government, are threatening to leave the government if the Biden ceasefire proposal is agreed upon by the Israeli war cabinet. It's just all over the place. Shortly after the Jewish Sabbath ended, Netanyahu's ultranationalist coalition partners, ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, issued statements attacking the Israeli proposal, which they heard about for the first time in Biden's speech. They said they told Netanyahu if this proposal goes through and turns into a deal, they will leave the coalition and topple the government. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid responded by issuing a statement committing to give Netanyahu a political safety net, if needed, in order to pass the deal. What are the consequences of them leaving the government? The consequences are major on Benjamin Netanyahu, who fears genuine prosecution, who was at the precipice of going to jail over corruption and bribery charges. So if the right-wing coalition that Benjamin Netanyahu has put forward in the current government, not just the war cabinet, but the current government, falls apart, then there has to be a re-election. And if that happens, Benjamin Netanyahu now has to go to left-leaning, or left-leaning for Israel, and centrist parties to be able to create a new government. I know you know, but I'm not sure everyone does, that if Bibi loses power, he will be on trial for corruption almost immediately. He has the prime minister immunity at the moment, but he would do anything to hold on to power at the moment. Yes. The U.S., Egypt, and Qatar issue a joint statement on Saturday calling on both Hamas and Israel to finalize an agreement embodying the principles outlined by President Biden. These principles brought the demands of all parties together in a deal that serves multiple interests and will bring immediate relief to both the long-suffering people of Gaza as well as the long-suffering hostages and their families. Biden administration officials worked on the phones Friday and Saturday to get statements of support from U.S. allies and Arab countries. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken spoke on the phone with the foreign ministers of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Turkey, and Qatar. The Emirati foreign minister issued a statement praising Biden's speech, and the Saudi foreign minister said his country supports any proposal that will end the war. French President Emmanuel Macron, British Foreign Minister David Cameron, and EU Foreign Minister Joseph Borrell also issued statements in support for Biden's speech. Biden has said in his speech that even if a deal is reached and a ceasefire begins, Israel has a right to defend itself and bring those responsible for October 7th to justice and could resume military operations if Hamas fails to fulfill its commitments. Two Netanyahu aides emphasized in a briefing that accommodated the proposal, Israel reserves the right to resume fighting at any time if Hamas violates its obligations under the deal. Those conditions could include not releasing the number of hostages agreed upon, or if Israel gets the impression that the negotiations in phase 2 of the deal are fruitless and used by Hamas to buy time. The aide said Israel's conditions for the end of the war have not changed, destroying Hamas's militant wing and the group's ability to govern, the release of all hostages, and ensuring that Hamas can't attack Israel in the future. Hamas's outlines for the condition are not vague. It is a permanent end to hostilities and a prisoner swap for all the hostages Hamas has for all the hostages, well, not all, but thousands of the many thousands of hostages that Israel currently has in detention. Israel's side, on the other hand, has some vague qualifiers like, oh, we can still turn around and attack for any reason that we see fit. Obviously, if it is left vague on the Israeli front and not with like clear-cut conditions, this is not a real negotiation or a real ceasefire at all. Having said that, however, the Palestinian envoys did very quickly, almost instantly after the Biden proposal, looked at the proposal, saw that it was obviously nearly identical to the proposals that they had suggested before, the ones that they said yes to in the past, and said, this seems great. Israel, on the other hand, has very different messages coming out of Israel. Some in the Israeli government said, no, absolutely not. We'll disband the Israeli government. We'll destroy it. Others said, no, we are not stopping until we completely eradicate Hamas, which, as you know, equals the death and destruction of the entirety of the Gaza Strip. The proposal for the release of hostages allows Israel to make sure that all these conditions will be realized before a permanent ceasefire takes effect, they said, which is basically openly stating that they're going to continue killing people even after they get all the hostages, which is a wild thing to openly recognize and openly admit, especially when the entire world is watching. But you can get to you get to make these statements when you're Israel, and you know full well that the media is not going to look at that and go, that's insane that you're saying this. And that if Hamas turns around and says, hey, they're saying they're going to kill us even after the hostage swap is done, then the American government can turn around and the media can turn around and be like, see, Hamas is ruining these proposals. Ultimately, though, I suspect that this will have a similar effect to the Rafah red lines. Maybe I'm being too optimistic about it, but the Rafah red line and the subsequent attacks from Israel caused a lot more animosity against Israel and caused a lot more pressure from the Western world than it did before. So I think that even with this poison pill that Netanyahu is trying to put into this provision, you're right, that is a poison pill. It ultimately feels like America is taking a stance against Israel's very open, declared actions. The proposal says that no later than the 16th day of implementation, indirect negotiations will begin between two parties in order to forge an agreement on the conditions for the implementation of phase 2 of this agreement, a Netanyahu aide said. The White House notified the Israeli Prime Minister's office about Biden's speech about 2 hours in advance. U.S. officials spoke to the Israeli ambassador in Washington, Mike Herzog, and one of Netanyahu's advisors, and described the speech to them in broad terms. The White House also informed Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, another war criminal, Yoav Gallant. The U.S. official said the White House was disappointed by Gantz's initial reaction, but on Saturday, Gantz issued a statement welcoming Biden's speech and calling on Netanyahu to push forward with the hostage deal. So that's the situation at hand. The longer the cessation, the harder it will be for Israel to resume. Western press on the ground in Gaza, UN fact-finding officials, etc., will make it difficult for Israel to justify bombing again. I agree. Something that Benjamin Netanyahu knows full well, which is why he very quickly stopped the ceasefire that took place for 7 days, if you remember. What? Can I get your insight, specifically the latter portion regarding the optics? Bro, what? I hate when people do this. They'll send a link one time, they get clapped, and then they just like literally keep going, hey man, can I get your insight on this? Can I get your insight on this?
Hello, my name.
Oh my God, dude. I'm not giving you my insight on this, okay? I don't know. I don't care. I don't care what the veteran guy is saying about Israel. I know he makes a lot of great videos. I know. Okay. No, it's this classic is Greg J. Stoker. Anyway, it's interesting because I've seen a twofold reaction. to this within the Israeli government. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are very clear about that. Yeah, this obviously means ending the war, but in a different spin I saw from the public channel 11 is that the talks at the end of the first stage supposedly include a permanent end to the war on the condition that Hamas military and civil control is completely dismantled. Kind of a split between no, bro, this ain't ours, and no, we offered it, but yeah, I think that they are trying to put poison pills into the negotiations process that no reasonable party would agree to for very understandable reasons. And therefore, I'm waiting for March, chatters. I think he's on his way. March was 3 months ago. That's a good one, guys. Anyway, here.
Phase, Hamas and Israel would negotiate a permanent end to hostilities. The final phase would include a major reconstruction operation in Gaza with international support. Among those urging Hamas to get on board was Foreign Secretary David Cameron, posting on social media, "Let's seize this moment and bring this conflict to an end." For President Biden, resolving the conflict has become a political imperative ahead of elections in 5 months' time. He's been losing the support of some younger voters and Muslim voters. Both have been vocal in their dissatisfaction at events in.
Netanyahu won't agree to the hostage release deal unless it polls well for him. Israeli families say they were told. That's a nutty piece of reporting from NBC News. The Israeli government made a conscious and deliberate decision to sacrifice the hostages, the hostage family forum said. I mean, dude, if I'm the hostage families, I'm losing my mind on a way more frequent basis. They just keep yelling at these guys and saying that you're a hurdle against our broader goals of just like doing ethnic cleansing. Just shut the fuck up. Stop ruining the situation. Why he is not banned for supporting terrorists? Who's that? Me? First time chatter. I do not support the Israeli occupying force, nor do I support the American government. So no, I am not supporting terrorists. If that's what you mean, I can clarify it for you.
In Gaza. For Palestinians in Gaza, if Hamas agrees to this deal, it will be the start of a long road to rebuild some semblance of the lives they once had. Vincent McAviney, BBC News.
Well, with me now is Mohammed Taha from BBC Arabic to discuss this further. Mohammed, we've had proposals before. What's in this one and what's new?
It is an Israeli proposal. It does not include a permanent ceasefire. It does not include a full withdrawal from the Israeli forces from Gaza, which are the main two demands.
I don't understand this. Those are two direct words that Biden mentioned. Like, are my ears deceiving me? There is like a pretty easy to read infographic that they put forward that had exactly those words on it. I don't understand why these guys are saying that is not the case. Is there something in the fine print of the proposal that directly contradicts the very clear cut text that declares a permanent cessation of hostilities?
Of Hamas.
So what is Hamas's response to this so far?
Hamas said we are responding positively to these proposals. They say that President Biden said that he mentioned permanent ceasefire. He actually mentioned permanent cessation of hostilities. They say that he mentioned.
That's what Israeli media is claiming. That's what Israel actually offered, but Biden's offer includes a permanent end to the hostilities and supposedly with Hamas still in power, given some of the things he said in his speech. Yeah. So what the f does that mean?
And full withdrawal from Gaza. He only mentioned withdrawal from the Israeli forces from the inhabited areas.
How much pressure will be on Hamas now to accept?
Like if overall what Biden meant was the exact opposite of what he said, if what Biden meant is like hidden in the fine print and he's playing fast and loose with these terms like it's not a full-blown ceasefire, it's a negotiated managed ceasefire, that sort of thing, then it's cooked. Of course it's cooked. Ryan Grimm has a take on it. There's a lot of manufactured confusion around these ceasefire proposals, but what happened is fairly simple. On 5/29, Israel's war cabinet approved an offer for a ceasefire that was transmitted to Hamas. Netanyahu only agreed to it under extreme pressure and over the opposition of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who are not in the war cabinet. On 5:30, Hamas rejected it, saying no talks unless Israel stopped this assault. I remember I talked about this as well. Hamas is now, this was one of the few instances where Hamas rejected the proposal, saying, no, you have to stop bombing us first. You have to stop bombing Rafah. Hamas is now rejecting Israel's proposal in an official statement. Okay, this was 2 days ago. Hamas now rejecting Israel's proposal in an official statement announcing first Israel will stop the war, then we will discuss a comprehensive prisoner exchange deal. Part of the reason, part of the political calculus here for Hamas was the recognition that the international community was going nutty mode over what Israel was doing. Now, of course, there's two ways out of this. One mind says, oh, wow, how disingenuous of Hamas to rely on Israel's inhumanity here. Well, the second question would still be, hello, Israel has every opportunity not to behave like animals and just stop bombing. And yet, for some weird reason, unbeknownst to me, we are just still operating like Israel is not a political entity comprised of human beings, but instead is just simply a natural disaster. On 5:31, Biden grabbed the Israeli proposal, which Netanyahu had been happy to see rejected by Hamas, and made it fully public, cleverly but accurately calling it the Israeli proposal, which it is, but Netanyahu hates it. So now Netanyahu is walking back from it while Hamas is responding positively. Now the mediators in U.S., Qatar, and Egypt are putting pressure on both Israel and Hamas to accept the deal. However, there's an issue here. The issue is the confusion isn't stemming, in my opinion, from whether this was an Israeli proposal or whether this was a Hamas proposal. The condition is stemming from the fine print. The Israeli side, on the one hand, depending on how far right they are, is presenting this as a permanent end to the war, and that's devastating for their goals of doing full-blown ethnic cleansing. The other side, on the Israeli political war, war cabinet, that's still pretty far right, like the Bibis, are trying to play fast and loose and claiming, no, we can still keep bombing. No, you don't understand. We can still keep bombing. I promise we'll keep bombing even after we get all the hostages. That is the key consideration here. Is this a real effort to create a permanent ceasefire and also bring about the release of hostages from the Israeli prisons and also on the Palestinian side in Gaza? Or is it simply a way for America to run political cover for Israel once again to say, hey, here are the conditions of the deal. It's called Israel gets to bomb you after they take all the hostages out. Logistically speaking, there's no other way of extracting hostages without a cessation of hostilities, at least in the short term anyway. You literally cannot take the hostages out without Israel stopping its bombing campaign, regardless. So that has to happen regardless if you want to take the hostages out. On 5:31, Biden grabbed the Israeli proposal. Now the mediators in U.S., Qatar, and Egypt are putting pressure on both Israel and Hamas to accept the deal. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, the far-right members, said they'll leave the government if the deal happens. That'll leave Netanyahu to form a government with center-right figures. And as you saw, this is the proposal laid out by Biden, a complete ceasefire, a permanent end to hostilities. A complete ceasefire and a permanent end to hostilities. Here's Netanyahu subtly acknowledging he did make the proposal, but that he doesn't really mean it because he'll keep waging war no matter what. Note the language. The prime minister authorized a negotiating team to present a proposal to that end, which would also enable Israel to continue the war until all of its objectives are achieved, including the destruction of Hamas's military and governing capabilities. Does that seem to be in any of the fine print on the Biden mentions? More confirmation this is Israel's offer. Senior Israeli official tells me the plan presented by President Biden is indeed the offer we made by the war cabinet through the mediators to Hamas. However, there's one major difference between President Biden's speech and the actual offer made by Israel. Israel has never agreed that negotiations between stage 1 and stage 2 can continue indefinitely, and during that time, the ceasefire lasts. This might mean that Hamas can keep the hostages that were not freed and continue to negotiate forever, thus achieving the end of the war while still holding on to the hostages. The attached quote from President's speech is what they are referring to. But again, the main point is that they confirm it's an Israeli proposal. Now, people are not very smart, as I like to repeat over and over and over again. And that, in this circumstance, is a benefit for us, those who enjoy peace, those who want a cessation of hostilities, and those who want Palestine to be free. What do I mean by this? Because this is pretty basic, pretty black and white, something that people can sink their teeth into, something that people can understand. They see a complete ceasefire, they think a complete ceasefire. They think a permanent end to hostilities. They see that, they read that, they internalize that, they say, oh, Biden finally woke up. He's finally trying to do some real presidential shit. He's finally trying to respond to Israel's cruelty and brutality. Okay? Israel trying to play fast and loose with the definitions of a permanent end to hostilities and saying, well, while the hostage negotiation process is still working, we will still continue to bomb because, we're going to say we need 100 hostages released. And we know full well that there aren't 100 alive hostages, let's say, for example, right? That means we can keep bombing you. And by you, I mean the entire Palestinian civilian population, which is mostly just like people living in tent cities at this point. They don't realize that if they do that, that looks exactly like the Brandon Rafah red line saga. Brandon says there's a red line on Rafah. Israel violates that red line in a very public way. All of a sudden, everyone's looking at the situation and going, holy shit, Israel is bloodthirsty. Israel just violated the red line because their thirst for baby murder cannot be satiated. Okay? This motherfucker came in here to grab a protein shake and fucked off. That's crazy. No, I'm kidding. Hold on. Your outfit looks good. Here, get closer to the microphone. I love this top. Where'd you get it?
Yes.
Zara. It's nice. It looks good. I think it's Israel's fault, not Biden's. They will probably release the clarification soon. What? No. Everything that Israel does, Biden knows better. He's a seasoned vet. He's literally been alive for longer than the state of isn't real, okay? The notion that he doesn't understand how Israel operates and does politics is ridiculous. People are saying boycott Zara.
Oh, are they on the list?
I don't know, but it seems to me like...
Okay, I'll take it back after today. They made an exception for this one. I'm gonna return it used. That hurts the company.
Please keep in mind that for mainstream journalists like Nadav Eyal or Suleiman Mazwadeh, that there's more parts that fell out of it. Like,
oh my God, the battery?
The battery fell out. Go find the battery and the cap and put it back in the right way, please.
I got it.
Make sure you put it in the right way. Are you putting it in the right way? No, there's not only one way to put it in. You might be putting it in the wrong way. Okay, let's see. Okay.
That shit.
Thank God. Okay, you
Look
can
at that
turn it
shit.
off.
Professional.
90% of the time, high-ranking Israeli official told me equals Netanyahu's. People told me leaks in these times are almost always selective. That being said, there's a good chance they're right.
Are we anywhere closer to a ceasefire after what happened yesterday?
That's what we're trying to figure out right now. Also, we're waiting for March, who is apparently at brunch and didn't realize that I asked him to come through, pull up, and he's coming now with the microphones. So is it not the first time Raj has returned a stinky shirt?
What? Are you dead naming me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, aside from the dead naming, he is right, though. You have returned stinky shirts before.
I have, yeah. Yeah, hey, can you just give me my month?
No.
This ain't a stinky shirt. How does it smell?
Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Do you understand what I mean? Like, the bad part about
this... Yeah, I put on sunscreen.
The bad part about this situation, obviously, is the fact that Israel is trying to play fast and loose with certain terms like ceasefire by saying, oh, we're negotiating the ceasefire, right? They are using this as an opportunity to be like, no, we can keep blowing up Palestinian babies. Here are the conditions as to how we can do that. Okay? So for them, they think they can have this semantics game that they're playing and have the world look the other way. And many outlets will do that. Many mainstream media outlets will do that. Except this is no longer 2014. We are in 2024. People were stupid in 2014 as well and didn't really pay attention. But now people are still stupid, but they're at least paying attention. What that means is Israel is trying to play fast and loose with the terms like ceasefire by saying, oh, we're negotiating the ceasefire, right? They are using this as an opportunity to be like, no, we can keep blowing up Palestinian babies. Here are the conditions as to how we can do that. Okay? So for them, they think they can have this semantics game that they're playing and have the world look the other way. And many outlets will do that. People who are paying a little bit of attention are going to see the headline. They're going to see Brandon saying permanent, complete ceasefire, permanent end to hostilities, and they're going to run along with that. It will be, in my opinion, difficult to portray Hamas as the spoilers in this regard. The dude Ryan screenshotted, Suleiman Mazwadeh, is Channel 11's national security correspondent who also came out with the narrative I mentioned previously. One thing that made me grin when he presented this on the broadcast is that he opened by saying, "Today we published this with the permission of the military censor, of course. Always remember this is a pulse for the government's narrative that is for the truth." So I think that Biden stressing complete ceasefire and permanent end to hostilities here goes against the wishes of Israel. Okay? That's what I think. I think him featuring those statements instead of doing this wishy-washy Israeli proposal thing where it's like, and there will be a negotiation process. And maybe Israel will keep blowing people up. But who knows? Like, instead of saying that, he's just saying ceasefire, permanent end to hostilities. That is, in my opinion, a way to pressure the Israeli war cabinet and a way to pressure Israel in general.
This, and what is the next stage do you see of these proposals going forward?
Of course, there is a huge pressure on both parties, on the Israeli party on Hamas party to accept the ceasefire. This war went so far with about 40,000 civilians died in Gaza, with a dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. No, a single fully functioning hospital, no school working, and these civilians are really want their life to come back.
Really hoping isn't doing a waiting game until after the election, since once Biden's out, Israel will get all the aid they want coming from Trump. Brother, I hate to report on this in a way that will make you sad, potentially, but once the elections are over, Biden, if he wins, will also give Israel all the aid on the planet. The elections are one of the only ways of trying to add a little bit of additional pressure to the administration, because if you threaten their re-election chances, maybe they'll act differently. But once the election's over, it's no holds barred for both Brandon and for Trump. I don't see how the ceasefire works without the collapse of the Israeli government and a new government that doesn't have such extremists such as Ben-Gvir and Smotrich or extreme views in general. Hamas is demanding a truce that includes a total ceasefire, and Israel's demand is for a truce that doesn't stop it wiping out Hamas, whatever that means. Exactly, but we know what that means, right? When this current war cabinet and this current Israeli Knesset says, we want a truce that doesn't stop us from wiping out Hamas, they actually mean wiping out Gaza or making Gaza impossible to live in, impossible to survive in. But you're right. I guess the additional goals for the Brandon camp in this circumstance would be, I guess, the additional goal for the Brandon camp in this circumstance would be the complete destruction of the Israeli government, the dissolution of the current government with I guess like an emergency re-election that would either see Bibi out of power and then Benny Gantz placed in his place. However, the issue is Benjamin Netanyahu has basically, as far as I understand, if I can trust Time Without an Owo, who is like the beating heart of all things going on in Israel, our Israeli chatter correspondent, Benjamin Netanyahu has regained what popularity he had lost prior to October 7, which means that he still has a lot of political power. And the fact that Yair Lapid, who is supposed to be like the most left figure, which would still be center right when it comes to dealing with this genocide, has said he would protect Benjamin Netanyahu's power and his seat. So they're saying Benjamin Netanyahu would be able to create a more center-right coalition this time around. Yes, I did see this. I covered this already. Yes, these guys will leave, but they won't leave if they genuinely think that there is a capacity for Netanyahu to rebuild a cabinet with center-left or center-right, really, ministers. For chatters, Yair Lapid did offer the government a safety not for this deal. Netanyahu could pass it and have some form of a coalition, but he never would. partially because he's not stupid and he knows very well that the future right now doesn't look like Gantz. It'll probably be a 2020-20 split between Bibi, Gantz, and a party most likely with Lieberman and Yossi Cohen. In this future, he needs Ben-Gvir. Oh, a safety net for this deal, you mean? Gary Lapid did offer government a safety net for this deal. Pretty much none of this leads the freedom of Palestinians? Yes. Then what is the exit ramp for a genocide? All realistic paths point to an endless ethnic cleansing campaign? No. I mean, there is currently a bunch of international organs of justice working against Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign. All of these are creating additional mechanisms of pressure, not only placed upon the state of Israel, but also placed upon the United States. The United States cannot maintain its unconditional support to Israel with the entire rule-based international order crumbling before its eyes. The United States, remember what I just said earlier about how mainstream media has to maintain a presence of like credibility and impartiality in an effort to continue making propaganda that aligns with State Department interests in times of need, and therefore they'll sometimes offer like real news coverage, or they'll basically give you like a news story. They'll feed it to you a little bit for you to go, wow, the New York Times is even saying this. That's crazy. That very same interest exists for America. America needs the rule-based international order to continue because America is leading the rule-based international order. That is a very effective soft power mechanism that reasserts American hegemonic power status unconditionally. So without that, if that falls apart, America loses one major power tool that it has at its disposal. You can use it against Russia. You can use it against foreign actors that you declare to be enemies all the time, but you can't use it if the ICJ and the ICC and all of these other instruments of international order, the UN, is so consistently and in a way that is broadly defiant of American interests, routinely repeating the notion that America's unconditional support for Israel is unjustifiable. This breaks this destroys the dog and pony show. Okay? They need it. They need to maintain that. They need to maintain that so they can maintain their dominance. And they will slowly but surely be forced to reckon with the reality that they cannot maintain it while also supporting, facilitating, and offering endless political cover to Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign. Because Israel keeps openly posturing against the United States of America while still getting unlimited support from the United States of America. Support in the form of, as we've seen, political cover at the UN with the Security Council vetoes that America routinely uses to defend Israel against the rest of the international community, and the political cover that it offers to Israel by openly sanctioning ICC prosecutors like Bensouda that we covered before at the behest of Israel. What if they choose Israel over global soft power? That's insane, because then it's over. Either way, it's over. It's either over for Israel in the long run, as it's interested in maintaining its apartheid in the current structures, in the current boundaries that it maintains its apartheid in, or it's over for the United States of America. It's over for international cooperation. I mean, that's way more devastating. Because Bibi can keep going without Gantz. He has 64 seats. He's comfy, but internally there are massive tensions. Actually, a not unlikely scenario is that the government will collapse because of the Haredi parties of all people. Not sure how much y'all covered this, but the topic of Haredi conscription is a massive one in Israel. I have talked about this quite a bit. And there's a good chance that the Haredi parties, who haven't managed to get anything on this topic, will quit the government so they can get a decision coalitionary agreement on this next government. We'll see, though. Again, things are moving very quickly. Yes, the Haredi parties, as I've discussed before, are very interesting because there's a lot of people who are like, because there's a lot of people in Israel that are like, what the f***? Why aren't these guys not serving in the IDF? It's a major point of contention in Israeli politics, aside from not letting women read. Like there's a couple different aspects here. One is obviously, the very important topic of should women be allowed to read? You laugh, but this is a big point of contention for many. Okay? And then you have a much larger party that unites all of the Haredi coalition, which is religious exemption from service. These guys are too busy reading, specifically reading, I guess, the Torah and doing religious studies, so they can't actually serve. This frustrates a lot of people who believe that they should also serve. Like the top of the hour ad break. I serve at the top of every hour. Did you turn that? Did you turn it on? Is the mic working? Okay, perfect. You look good. Good brunch fit. You bastard. I heard you went to dinner with Noah and Will the other night after our tier 2 to tier 4 Patreon episode. That's why you were trying to get the fuck out of there. The fuck? I was not invited. I mean, I wouldn't have gone anyway, but still. An invite would have been nice. Here's a 3-minute ad break now. Yeah, and their schools literally get more funding than all the other schools. There's complicated internal dynamics here between Shah's, BB, and the UTJ, but basically the Haredi parties won't give up unless they get a complete exemption. Don't forget to mention that the Haredis get money for learning the Torah because of social services. Yes, this aspect of it is also very funny. I talked about this early on. It's very, I think it's hilarious that like a lot of people in Israel have like a distaste for the Haredi population. I already ran the top of the hour ad break chatter. You've missed it. The Haredi population, partially because they also have a distaste for the settlers, some of which are the Haredi population, or many of which are. Haredis are the Orthodox Jews, like the fundies. The Israeli liberal crowd hates them because they see them as welfare queens. Some of them also hate the Haredi population because they see them as like ruining the project of Israeli apartheid. Why are they excluded from service? Because they're too busy learning about religion, dog. That's why. But it's really funny because on the other hand, Ben Gvir is giving them weapons. So they're not even serving the military, but they're getting weapons so they can go and kill Palestinians in the West Bank. And sometimes Israelis as well, because they mistook them for Palestinian, which happens more frequently than you would think. It's kind of insane they get so much funding for nothing, bro. They get exemptions on property taxes, free money to study the Torah, shit like that. Oh, hell yeah. On my actual caller? Gay pride, baby. Wait, why is it vibrating? Wait, you're not coming? Wait, why not? Oh, okay. No, I didn't. We need you to carry us march? Yeah. No. You're talking about what referred to the Chardal demographic, aka the national Haredi demographic of Ben Gvir and Smotrich to get weapons. The UTJ and Shah's Haredi base are not national. They even used to be anti-Zionist or very political and don't get guns. They just really study the Torah and do sexism.
Everybody get ready for Pride with Hasan Piker live from his chest.
Yeah. Okay, we'll figure it out.
POV, you're at Pride.
Okay.
At least wear a tank top where you can see your chest hair or whatever to make it more humble.
Yeah. I'm gonna do that. Don't worry.